I was astonished to unexpectedly eavesdrop on my own family mercilessly criticizing me as if I were insignificant. It began with a trivial mistake, or perhaps fate decided I needed to learn the truth. My elder sister, Emily, had discarded her old phone after upgrading, and since mine was barely functioning, I started using hers without thinking to erase it. One evening, lying in bed, a notification appeared from a group chat named Family Priority, a chat I had no knowledge of. Feeling intrigued, I clicked on it. Emily. Ugh, she's so pathetic. She always prioritizes us, even when we treat her poorly. Mom. That's her role, lacking a backbone, just like her father. Emily. It's truly comedic. She takes extra shifts to help with bills, but refuses to do anything for herself. Mom. Because she understands she's worth no more than that. Emily. I wager if we asked, she'd sacrifice her college fund for my wedding. Mom. We should absolutely try that. As tears blurred my vision, my fingers trembled, gripping the phone tightly. They mocked me, the very people I dedicated my life to. Staying up late to make dinner when Mom was weary, lending Emily money when she needed it, always putting them first, but to them, I was just pathetic for it. I controlled the lump in my throat, my body shaking not from sadness, but from anger. They assumed they'd trapped me, that I'd endure forever. I let them delude themselves until the moment I'd walk away permanently. For the following days, I behaved as if nothing had changed, cooking, working extra hours to settle bills, nodding and smiling at Emily's wedding complaints. But internally, I was done with it. Every faux smile turned my stomach. I wasn't family. I was a servant, unbeknownst to them. Then, one evening, Emily arrived home, radiant and excited. I've found the perfect wedding venue, she proclaimed, dropping into the chair next to me. I feigned interest. There's a problem, though, she pouted. It's a bit over budget. You wouldn't mind helping out, right? Mom interjected seamlessly. They don't need college right now, honey. Emily's wedding takes precedence. I stared at them, shocked by their audacity. They assumed I would hand over the money. I merely smiled and replied, of course, while they remained unaware of what was unfolding. That night, I transferred every penny from my college savings into a newly created account solely under my name. I formulated a plan for the subsequent weeks, acting as the perfect, compliant daughter, ensuring their lives remained uncomplicated. I listened to Emily cry over dress fittings and wedding plans, but in reality, I was preparing my escape. I began selling anything they wouldn't miss. Old jewelry, handbags, anything valuable. Every cent went into my new account. Away from their reach, a new account was established, which eventually led to the last piece of my great escape, a job offer in a distant place, beyond their reach. The moment of realization arrived earlier than anticipated, when Emily burst into my room one evening, her eyes fiery with emotion. You haven't transferred the funds for the venue yet, she exclaimed. I feigned ignorance. Oh, I thought I did, I replied. Her expression was stern. Check again, she demanded. Mom had apparently called the venue, and they confirmed no payment had been received. Standing in the doorway with her arms folded, she insisted that they needed the money immediately. This isn't about you, she emphasized. That's when something inside me broke. Rising to my feet, I finally let go of the pretenses. I don't have the money anymore, I declared, my voice steady. What did you do with it? Emily asked, visibly shaken. For myself, I answered, for the first time asserting my own needs. I saw the panic start to spread on their faces, and Mom stepped forward, her voice sharp. That money was for the family. I laughed. Honestly laughed for the first time. You mean it was for Emily? I corrected, their silence speaking volumes. That marked the moment I decided to leave for good. They yelled and pleaded, with Emily's cries echoing through the house. How could you do this to me? Mom's voice trembled. Where will you go? You have nowhere else. But they were wrong. I retrieved the suitcase, already packed and hidden at the back of my closet, slung it over my shoulder as if it were the only thing I owned, and declared, I got a new job. I have my own place. I no longer need you. I'd never seen my mother appear so terrified, not of losing her daughter, but losing her scapegoat. I moved past them, out into a world where I finally had value. After years of allowing them to treat me like a doormat, discarding my needs while they ridiculed me, I'd ceased to be complicit. Now they fell apart. My mother, who consistently treated me as a cumbersome duty, suddenly craved my attention. Emily, the perfect older sister, praised by everyone while I remained the background fixture, found herself stripped of everything without me. They had long seen me as expendable, now coming to realize I was the cornerstone of their lives, walking away at last. Settling into my new life was daunting. Initially, old habits crept in at the supermarket, debating cheap options to conserve money for household expenses, until I remembered those no longer existed. No one awaited dinner at home. No one called to rectify their blunders, just me. For the first time, my finances were mine alone. I indulged in luxuries of good coffee, soft blankets, things I'd never before allowed myself. At home, in silent solitude, I enjoyed my coffee. No shouting, no demands. It was peace, a novel sensation for me. Joining coworkers for an outing after work was an unfamiliar yet liberating experience, realizing I was no longer merely the dependable one, but finally someone people wanted to be around. Here I sat, basking in an existence free from the burdens of others, in a small eatery, surrounded by laughter from people who genuinely appreciated me. I felt an unfamiliar warmth in my chest. It was a sense of belonging. I hadn't realized how deprived I was of it until this moment. It had been 2 months since I last communicated with my family, 60 days of silence, rebuilding, and freedom. Then one evening, my phone vibrated with a message from Emily. She wrote, "I can't believe you're doing this to me. Do you even care about family?" As I read her words, a sense of disgust twisted within me. There was no apology, no self-reflection, only an attempt to manipulate and guilt-trip me. I took a deep breath, assessed my feelings, and did something unimaginable. I blocked her, my mother, and any possible number they could use. For the first time, I chose myself, and it felt liberating. Days turned into weeks. I anticipated more messages, or even them showing up at my doorstep, but they didn't. Instead, I started receiving calls from extended family members who had always turned a blind eye to my treatment. Some tried to guilt me, saying things like, "Your mother is struggling. Emily's wedding was canceled. She's heartbroken. You should be there." I ignored them all. But then a cousin, who had always been kind despite maintaining distance, reached out. His message read, "I heard what happened. I'm proud of you for walking away. They never deserved you." Tears welled up, not from sorrow, but from relief. Finally, someone saw and understood. Later, an email from my mother arrived, short, icy, and blunt. "I hope you're happy. You've ruined this family." I read it twice and then laughed. She thought I was the problem, not the years they'd belittled me, used me, and taken me for granted. To her, I was the villain for finally prioritizing myself. I didn't even reply. I deleted it and continued on with my day. As months went by, I thrived. I earned a promotion, formed genuine friendships, and discovered a version of myself beyond their validation. Then one day, at a cafe, I heard a voice. Oh my God. I turned to see Emily. She looked different, stressed and weary, like someone unused to self-care because she always relied on others. For a fleeting moment, old habits resurfaced, a flicker of concern, a desire to ask if she was all right. But I remembered. She was no longer my responsibility. Her mouth opened, but I turned away, proceeding to the counter to order my coffee. I felt her stare, waiting, hoping for acknowledgement, but I gave none. She'd spent years making me feel invisible. Now, she finally knew how it felt. Being at the cafe with Emily surprisingly left me feeling indifferent. For years, I had felt bound to them, convinced I would always feel responsible, that even through the hurt, I couldn't completely sever ties. But there she was, staring at me with wide eyes and parted lips, searching for the right words to win me back. In that moment, I had a profound realization. I owed her nothing, not even a smile, a nod, or pity. She meant nothing to me now, and that newfound freedom felt sweeter than I could have ever imagined. However, deep down, I knew there was more to come. This wasn't over yet because Emily wasn't the only one with demands. My mom was lurking in the wings, ready to make her move. 3 days later, my prediction was confirmed by a loud, persistent knock on my door. I didn't need to look, I already knew it was Mom. I thought about leaving her out in the cold, just as she had done to me for so many years. But no, I decided to confront her. I wanted her to see the woman I had become, the one who had walked away for good, no longer the submissive girl she once dominated. I opened the door to find her standing there, arms crossed, her mouth a rigid line. "You look well," she said, the words more accusatory than kind, resentful of my success without her. I leaned nonchalantly against the door frame, arms folded. "What do you want?" I asked. She let out a sharp breath, looked away. "Can I come in?" "No." Her flinch was satisfying. It was the first time I had ever denied her anything. I had nothing more to give. "Fine, we'll talk here," she sighed, massaging her temples. I let the silence linger, wanting her to feel the discomfort of no longer being in charge. Eventually, she broke the silence, clearing her throat. "I know you've been avoiding us," she stated, "but it's time to stop being childish." I almost laughed at the irony. Was ditching the people who belittled and exploited me childish? "How so?" asked, tilting my head. Her jaw tightened. "We're family. We don't just desert one another." I let her words hang, the hypocrisy clear, before speaking. "You abandoned me long ago." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time, she was at a loss for words. A long, heavy silence ensued. I watched the tension in her clenched fists and pursed lips as she worked to maintain her composure. Mom hated losing control, having spent a lifetime molding me into a perfect, docile daughter who would give up everything and ask for nothing. But that daughter no longer existed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice brisk. "We've always taken care of you." I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. "That's not true." Her expression faltered. "Of course it is." "You called me pathetic," I said, my tone steady. "You and Emily ridiculed me for putting you first, even when you treated me like garbage. You said I was only useful when I sacrificed everything for you." Her face drained of color. I smiled, knowing she couldn't deny it. She drew a sharp breath, trying to deny it. "I don't have time for this," she insisted. "No," I interrupted. "You've never had time for me, except when you needed something." Her nostrils flared in anger. "That's not true," she countered. I crossed my arms. "So, you're just here to check in, not to request anything?" Her brief hesitation was all the confirmation I needed as she sighed deeply, rubbing her temples like she was the one under strain. Finally, she dropped her facade. "Fine," she admitted. "Yes, I need something." "Of course you do," I thought, as she stood up straighter, attempting to regain some of her usual aloof confidence. Emily was facing difficulties. She hadn't been herself since the wedding collapsed. I stayed silent. "Our mother sighed. She needs help, financial help." I exhaled slowly in disbelief. "You're incredible," I replied. She frowned. "Excuse me?" "She treated me horribly," I said, keeping my tone even but firm. "She insulted me, belittled and used me, and now that everything's falling apart, you expect me to rescue her?" "She's your sister." My laugh was dry. "No, she isn't." My words tasted like liberation. Our mother's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I don't have a sister," I stated simply. "Not anymore." Her expression turned stern. "You're being heartless." "No." I stepped forward, voice calm and determined. "Heartless is what you did, calling your own daughter pathetic behind her back, expecting me to sacrifice my potential so Emily could have a wedding she didn't merit." Her lips pressed tightly. "You're making a grave mistake." I smiled. "No, I'm finally making the right decision." I stepped back, closing the door in her face. As the lock clicked into place, a sense of relief swept over me. For years, I had been their pawn, their bank, and their emotional punching bag. Not anymore. I didn't check if she lingered at the door. I didn't care. I turned around, walked back into my apartment, and curled up on the couch, allowing myself to finally relax. Days turned into weeks. Our mother didn't return, and Emily never reached out again. Thus, the burden I had carried for so long vanished. I blossomed. I traveled, made friends who truly appreciated me. I lived a life I relished and never once missed them. One day, passing through the city, I saw them again, our mother and Emily, sitting in a small cafe, looking grim and worn out. They had changed, tired and stressed, no longer the polished figures they once were, people who realized they lost the one person who held everything together. I paused momentarily, allowing Emily's eyes to catch mine. She froze, and our mother turned, her expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, I wondered if they might approach me, if an apology was forthcoming, but they remained seated. They knew I was no longer theirs. I turned and walked away, not casting them another look. I built a life for myself, a beautiful life where I was significant, valued, and loved not for what I could provide, but for who I was. As for them, they faded into history, like the specters they had always been. I never looked back, and I never regretted it.